Welcome friends. Today's topic is pregnancy-induced hypertension. This is a very important topic, but today we are going to see it or kind of revise it from MCQ point of view. By definition, this definition also keeps on changing. The criteria keep on changing. There is addition and deletion of previous things. So if you go book-wise, Datta says something else, recent edition of Williams says something else. But in general, the consensus says that if there is rise in blood pressure above 140 by 90 millimeters, or the diastolic blood pressure rises above 90 millimeter of Hg, taken twice, 6 hours apart, it's called as pregnancy-induced hypertension. Or if there is rise or the mean arterial pressure is above 105 millimeter of Hg, or there is rise of 20 millimeter on the previous value in a pregnant lady after 20 weeks, it is called as PIH. So again, the criteria is diastolic more than 90, or overall blood pressure more than 140 by 90, or rise in mean arterial pressure by 20 millimeters, or the mean arterial pressure is more than 105 in a pregnant lady who was previously normotensive and now she's having pregnancy which is more than 20 weeks. The other things are like edema, pitting edema over the ankles after 12 hours, or if there is rapid gain in weight. Now in pregnancy we see edema physiologically as well. Physiological edema and pathological edema, they are little different. Physiological edema is because of the pressure of the gravid uterus, that is why the venous return decreases, and the way she stands up, the venous return gets affected throughout the day when she is working, and the edema is more on the lower limbs at the end of the day. But as she takes rest throughout the night, this edema decreases. So this is physiological edema of pregnancy. But in PIH or in any other pathological edema, the edema would be not just on dependent parts of the body, but it will also be seen on the hands, on face, so facial puffiness would be there, and this edema will not subside after rest. So usually the patient tells you like the chappals are getting tight or the rings are getting tight. These are the symptoms. The other criteria to label it as preeclampsia or PIH is proteinuria. So if there is proteinuria, if overall 24 hours urine is collected, then more than 300 milligram of proteins, if they are found in the urine, it is called as proteinuria and it suffices the definition of PIH. Or presence of either 1 plus or 2 plus on dipstick method and 2 samples 4 to 6 hours apart in absence of UTI, then it is said that patient is having PIH. So the definition, 3 components: rise in blood pressure, edema and proteinuria. Now some book says that edema is not the criteria anymore. Rapid weight gain is not considered as component of PIH. So more stress on rise in blood pressure in a previously normotensive female beyond 20 weeks plus presence of proteinuria. So please remember these components from point of view of definition. Many MCQs are asked on this, like to label a patient as PIH, following are the criteria except. Then you have to stress on these points and please remember all the criteria. Now how this PIH is classified? There may be gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, eclampsia, chronic hypertension. If someone is already having hypertension, chronic hypertension, and preeclampsia or eclampsia superimposed on chronic hypertension. So you all are very well acquainted with this classification. Now what are the causes of hypertension less than 20 weeks? Suppose a patient comes and she has increased blood pressure before 20 weeks. She may have chronic hypertension and now she is pregnant, means pregnancy superimposed on chronic hypertension. Then later on she may have symptoms of preeclampsia or eclampsia superimposed on chronic hypertension. Or think of molar gestation. Rule out that whether the pregnancy is a molar pregnancy, because lots of HCG that may lead to increased blood pressure even before 20 weeks. Multiple gestation. In multiple gestation, again the hormones are more, all the pregnancy symptoms are exaggerated, so that may lead to increase blood pressure even before 20 weeks. Mirror syndrome. In fetal head drops, that will lead to anasarca, whole body edema, and also rise in blood pressure. So again a question is asked, PIH, it is always beyond 20 weeks. So remember in MCQ you have to say it's after 20 weeks and it is called as pregnancy induced hypertension. In what are the cases or what are the reasons where hypertension can be seen before 20 weeks? So please remember these causes in the form of chronic hypertension, molar gestation or multiple gestation. What is the incidence? It is common in primigravida. It's a disease of primi. This is called as, so please remember this, PIH is a disease of primi. It is less commonly seen in multigravidas. What are the risk factors? Genetic predisposition. If there is history that mother had or a first degree relative, then always the patient has more predisposition towards PIH. Smoking is a protective factor for PIH. So when there is smoke, patient smokes, then she is having less risk of having PIH. What are the other things where smoking acts as a protective factor? The other two disorders are, one in fibroid and the other one is endometriosis. So smoking has, it decreases the estrogenic levels and probably because of that it provides protection. Nulliparous patient, usually less than 20 years or then otherwise later age, that is more than 35 years, are more prone for having PIH. Whenever the patient is obese, the BMI is high, more than 35, she is having more risk of having PIH. What are the other indication or other predisposing factors? If there is previous history of preeclampsia, patient having preeclampsia in previous pregnancy, she is more likely to have eclampsia in this pregnancy as well. Multiple pregnancies, molar pregnancies and hydrops fetalis where there is large placenta, hyperplacentosis, that leads to PIH. Medical disorders, if the patient has chronic hypertension, diabetes because of the vasculopathies, renal diseases. If patient is having renal diseases, she is very likely to have PIH in pregnancy. Collagen vascular diseases, antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, again very common reason where PIH would be found. Hereditary thrombophilias, again make the patient prone for developing pregnancy-induced hypertension. You must have learned the etiopathogenesis of PIH in details during undergraduate levels. Basically, there is in physiological changes of pregnancy, we have seen that in pregnancy the vessels become, there is decreased peripheral vascular resistance. The vessels dilate and they become refractory to the vasopressor agents. So if there is vasopressor agent present in the body, still the vessels are refractory. They don't undergo vasoconstriction under the effect of these vasopressor agents. This is normal physiological change which is beneficial for good materno-fetal circulation, but in PIH this whole system is affected. There is defective placentation, that means actually the trophoblastic tissue, they invade the vasculature beyond the deciduomyometrial junction and the vessels, the walls of the vessels are broken and thus there is lake formation and there is blood stasis where the maternal and fetal exchange can very well take place. And the vessels, because the tunica media is already eroded, they are not responsive to the vasopressor agent. They become refractory to that. But in PIH, what happens? This invasion of trophoblast is incomplete. So the vessels, they don't get invaded completely. Because of that, they respond to the vasopressor agents. So whenever there are vasopressor agents present in the body, they undergo vasoconstriction and thus it affects the circulation going from mother to the fetus. And thus, once this vasoconstriction is there, then mother has to have more blood pressure to provide blood to the fetus. So that is how her blood pressure goes on increasing. There is endothelial dysfunction, vasospasm of the vessels, because first thing, this refractoriness is lost. Then the other thing is there is presence of less vasodilator agents and more vasoconstrictor agents. Dilators are in comparison to constrictors are less, and thus the whole effect is that the vessels remain refractory, usually under vasoconstriction, and thus there is increased blood pressure. Placenta, there is premature aging of placenta. Villi, they show syncytial degeneration. There is acute atherosis of the spiral arterioles. Obliterative endarteritis is seen. These changes are seen in the liver, again in the kidneys. So these are very important changes. All over the body, these endarteritis changes would be seen. In liver, there would be periportal hemorrhages. HELLP syndrome, which is found almost in 10 to 15% cases, there would be hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, and low platelet count. Thus, it is called as HELLP, H-E-L-L-P. HELLP, it's again important from MCQ point of view. Seen mostly in 28 to 36 weeks, around that time. Usually the presentation is patient has PIH and she comes with either epigastric pain or right upper quadrant pain. There can be associated nausea and vomiting. HELP means H stands for hemolysis, H-E. H, there would be increased bilirubin because of increased hemolysis. Serum bilirubin level will be more than 1.2 ml per deciliter. Presence of cystocytes in the peripheral blood smear, Burr cells, and absent placenta haptoglobin is the signs of hemolysis. Elevated liver enzymes. SGOT would be more than 72 and LDH, if it is more than 600, it is confirmatory that patient is in HELP. And the last factor, but very important, that low platelet count. Hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, and low platelet count. The platelet count is less than 1 lakh per cubic millimeter. So this whole picture, clinical picture, which is seen in 10 to 15% of PIH is called HELP. Management is steroids, and we need to give platelets to the patient by giving components. And immediate delivery is to be started, because please remember the word or the sentence that the curative treatment for PIH is termination of pregnancy. So PIH we manage with the help of antihypertensive, or in case of conversion we give anticonvulsants, but the treatment, curative treatment, is termination of pregnancy. So whenever we have any complication like in the form of HELP syndrome or eclampsia or coma, in that case the curative treatment is always termination of pregnancy. So if you have MCQ that what is the treatment of HELP, don't just get stuck at components and steroids. Please think of even termination, because that is the treatment. These are the things we are managing till for the general condition of the patient, but whatever is the curative thing is termination of pregnancy. So we have to immediately start, irrespective of gestational age, we should start inducing the patient depending on the cervical status, whatever method we can choose. LACS, if required, we have to have good platelet levels and then go for LACS, because otherwise patient will land up in hemorrhage. So this is how HELP is managed. Pathology, in kidneys there would be glomerular endotheliosis, cardiac there would be again subendothelial hemorrhages, brain there would be edema, thrombosis, posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome. So these are some effects of PIH on different important organs. Now clinically the patient presents in mild, as I said, that she will just give history of noticing edema on the face and on dependent organs on hand, like rings are getting tightened, chappals are getting tightened, bangles, whatever she is using, normally she is unable to use. On examination you will see that the weight gain is more than normal, it's fast. You will also see edema all over the body, pitting type of edema, which doesn't vanish after rest. Blood pressure examination, you will see that blood pressure has risen. If this spectrum is at the end point, then there would be alarming or warning symptoms before the patient lands up in eclampsia. These are again important, that what are the warning symptoms, where you should consider that she may have convulsion or coma now. The symptoms are headache, epigastric pain, visual disturbances in the form of blurring, disturbed sleep, there may be jaundice. So if the patient has these symptoms, that she is having headache, nausea, vomiting, epigastric pain, blurring, you should always consider that she may have she may likely to have eclampsia now. On examination, you will find exaggerated deep tendon reflexes. So these are the signs which tell you that she may worsen now. Biochemical features, if you do lab test, hemogram will show low platelet, urine there would be proteinuria, LFTs, serum bilirubin, SGPT, SGOT, LDH, everything would be raised. In renal function test, serum uric acid is raised more than 4.5. It is a marker of preeclampsia, means we can use this as a screening test. That if a pregnant lady having high levels of serum uric acid, then she is having higher risk of having PIH later in the pregnancy. Serum creatinine BUN will also be raised. So MCQ can be asked this way, that what are the predictive tests for PIH? Or this MCQ is predictive tests for PIH are all except, and the options given are shake test, serum uric acid, gain in weight more than 2 kg per month, and rollover test. Now let's go one by one. Shake test is not at all related with PIH. Shake test is used to know fetal lung maturity. So that is the answer, because this is totally irrelevant. Serum uric acid, yes, it can be used as screening test that we just said. If someone is having higher levels of serum uric acid, then she is likely to have PIH. Gain in weight, because of edema, weight gain is more in PIH patients. Rollover test, you all should know, Giant's rollover test. Again, very favorite question of the examiners. What is it? If around 24-28 weeks or 28 to 32 weeks, some people say that, you make the patient sleep in left lateral position, take her blood pressure. After a while, make her sleep supine, wait for 5 minutes, and then repeat her blood pressure. If you see that her blood pressure is increased by 20 mm of Hg in supine position, that means the refractoriness of the vasculature is lost. What happens? When from left lateral position she is made supine, at that particular time her gravid uterus is having pressure on the vena cava, the venous return is decreasing, the blood flow, cardiac output is decreased, renal blood flow is decreased. That's why there is renin-angiotensin mechanism activation. Angiotensin 1, 2, angiotensin secretes vasoconstriction that leads to rise in blood pressure. So it should actually be absent in a normal pregnant lady. There should be refractoriness. It should not act. But in a lady where the blood pressure rises, that means she is likely to have PIH. Her physiological changes are not as per the requirement. The renin-angiotensin still works in her. So it becomes a screening test, and the name given to it is Giant's rollover test. What are the other tests? Very important from MCQ point of view. Uric acid we have seen. Mean arterial pressure you know, if the mean arterial pressure is high. Urinary calcium. If there is hypocalciuria, it is a risk factor. Angiotensin sensitivity, in which if some angiotensin is given to the patient, again there would be sudden rise in blood pressure, which is suggestive that she is having that reflex action of vasoconstriction to these vasopressor agents. That means she is likely to have PIH. Rollover test, which we have just seen. Doppler ultrasound. It's now coming in a big way. Just put Doppler color flow, uterine artery around 24 weeks. If you see there is a diastolic notch or the resistant index is very high, that suggests that she is likely to have PIH later. Now currently whatever tests we are available with us, Doppler ultrasound is the best test to predict that this patient may have PIH later. That's a sign that the placentation is defective and there may be PIH or maybe IUGR later on. So we should keep a watch on the patient as well as on the baby in that particular case. Even presence of fibronectin is suggestive of that there is chance that this patient will develop PIH later on. So please don't forget, I repeat myself, serum uric acid test, mean arterial pressure, urinary calcium, angiotensin sensitivity, rollover test, Doppler ultrasound and fibronectin are the screening test or prediction test for PIH. MCQs are asked many times on these topics. Again, let's see our MCQ. A pregnant woman in third trimester has normal blood pressure when standing and sitting, but when supine, her blood pressure drops to 90 to 50. This is just written that pregnant woman. It's not PIH or anything. So why the blood pressure drops? This is kind of supine hypotension syndrome. So the answer is because of compression of the inferior vena cava. There would be pressure, venous return decreases, and collaterals, if they don't work, then there would be hypotension. It was not related with just pregnancy-induced hypertension. What are the maternal effects of PIH? In mother, PIH can lead to eclampsia. What is eclampsia? All the symptoms of preeclampsia when there is presence of either convulsions or coma. In addition to all those symptoms, it is called as eclampsia. It is seen in 2% of the patients. It may lead to abruptio placentae. It's very common. If there is PIH and PV bleeding antepartum, first thing which comes to your mind is abruptio. Thing is, there is hypertension, vasoconstriction, and placenta is defective. That placentation is defective. So there are very high chances that there would be abruptio placentae in case of PIH. HELP syndrome, pulmonary edema, acute renal failure, even acute cardiac failure, DIC almost in 11%, and PPH after delivery. There are big list of effects of PIH on mother, but these are few important things which we are highlighting on. Fetal effects, usually because of complications, we need to deliver the patient early. That is why preterm and prematurity is seen in the fetus. That's the most common side effect. As the defective placentation is there and there is vasoconstriction, all the substrate reaching to the fetus, they are less in quantity. So naturally fetal growth gets affected, and IUGR is very commonly seen in fetuses in women with PIH. There can be sudden intrauterine death. That may be because of abruption or maybe because of chronic asphyxia, means acute on chronic asphyxia. Baby is anyways asphyxiated, and if there is any insult, then the baby may land up in IUD. Even during labor, such babies who have IUGR, they cannot really sustain the process of labor. They cannot really get the stress or cannot bear with the stress of labor, and they usually land up in asphyxia during delivery, and that may increase chances of operative delivery. Management of PIH. Whenever we diagnose, it's better to admit the patient and observe for a few days, start her on drugs, and if she responds, if BP is under control, you might send her home again, but it's better to admit the patient first. If the PIH is mild, then till 37 completed weeks we can wait. We can advise her or give her complete bed rest. Ask her to keep a watch on fetal count. Tell her about warning symptoms. She is supposed to tell us immediately if she gets headache, epigastric pain, nausea, vomiting, blurring. She should be aware that if she worsens, these would be the symptoms. So immediately she should warn us that this is what is happening to her. Every 4 to 6 hourly we should be checking her blood pressure over 24 hours. So that gives us fair idea that what kind of blood pressure readings she has and what antihypertensive response she is giving to us. Daily we should do urine albumin. Weekly we should have her reports of LFTs, RFTs, platelet, and on admission fundoscopy, and as per the requirement we can repeat the fundoscopy examination. That tells us about whether there is presence of edema, papilledema, or any ophthalm related complications. The cause of sudden loss of vision can be retinal detachment in such patients. This again was asked as an MCQ. Usually in mild hypertension, we don't mind continuing the pregnancy till 37 weeks if fetus is doing well, if her blood pressure is controlled and she doesn't show any worsening symptoms. Why do we give antihypertensive? What do we want to achieve? We want to have the indications of giving antihypertensive if the diastolic blood pressure is more than 100 mm of Hg, or if systolic blood pressure is more than 160 millimeter of Hg. Then only we start antihypertensive, not before that. And they actually help us in preventing ICH, then left ventricular failure, that is intracerebral hemorrhage, left ventricular failure, acute renal failure, DIC, and encephalopathy, hypertensive encephalopathy. Hypertensive help in prolonging the pregnancy, but they don't modify the disease process. We have to always remember that whenever we are giving antihypertensive, our aim is not to achieve completely normal blood pressure, because if we overzealously correct the blood pressure, that will affect the fetal circulation, and then fetus will land up in IUGR or asphyxia. So our aim is to maintain uteroplacental circulation, avoid IUGR, but still control her blood pressure so that she doesn't land up in intracerebral bleed or renal failure or all these things. So here we have to have a strict balance between maternal condition as well as we should manage the fetal circulation. So this is the whole idea behind giving antihypertensives. We'll continue with the treatment, but we'll take a break here. Thank you.